Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, September 14th, 2023. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says the House will stay in session starting next week until the federal government funding issue is resolved. The deadline to prevent a government shutdown is September 30th. The Speaker is still at odds with conservative Republicans who are seeking further spending cuts and some non-spending policy additions to any short-term funding bill. President Joe Biden gives a speech on the economy in Largo, Maryland, not far from Washington, discussing the government funding standoff and contrasting his Bidenomics to what he calls Republicans MAGAnomics. 140,000 members of the United Auto Workers Union could strike at midnight tonight if they do not reach a new contract with the Big Three U.S. automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, as the U.S. House passes a bill to prevent California from limiting the sale or use of new gas-powered vehicles. Hunter Biden, son of President Biden, has been indicted on 3 federal charges related to buying a firearm without disclosing that he was illegally using drugs at the time. And NASA releases an independent study on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UFOs, concluding that further study is needed to determine exactly what's happening. And NASA Administrator Bill Nelson is challenged at a news conference by a reporter talking about whistleblower claims the U.S. government is hiding evidence of beyond-Earth technology. From ABC News, during a closed-door meeting with his conference, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Thursday dared Republican hardliners to try to oust him as Speaker, according to multiple sources in the room. A defiant McCarthy said he's not afraid of a motion to vacate, sources said, telling his colleagues, "Move the effing motion." Some in the room described Speaker McCarthy as visibly irritated. Tensions between Speaker McCarthy and the House Freedom Caucus are at a high level amid a spending showdown on Capitol Hill. Speaker McCarthy on Thursday warned Republicans they would lose the shutdown fight if they don't start passing bills soon, according to sources. He said the House will stay in session if the government is not funded. And again, this is from the ABC News article. Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida, and members of the House Freedom Caucus are opposed to a continuing resolution to keep the government open after the September 30th deadline that doesn't include their policy demands, such as language on border security and, quote, weaponization of the Justice Department. We'll hear from Speaker McCarthy in just a moment, but first, Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, a member of the Freedom Caucus, interviewed by C-SPAN this morning.
Congressman, from press reportings, it sounds like the Freedom Caucus members rejected a plan by the Speaker to move forward on a continuing resolution and bundle a so-called mini bus with spending bills on the floor. Can you walk us through what the Speaker offered and if you oppose it or support it?
First of all, Greta, you know it's a sad day when we're at the last minute coming up, and we've got 7 days left in legislative session to be dealing with a budget and appropriation bills that should have been dealt with a month ago. One of the agreements for those of us who held out our vote, was that he would go to regular order, which means having the 12 appropriation bills in June or July so that we could look at it and make cuts and get this country back on a firm economic footing. That hasn't happened. And so, it's been hard to get the Speaker to come up with something that's concrete. Here's what we want, and this is the bare minimum that I think we ought to have in this country now, where we're $32 trillion in debt and counting. What we ask for is all the total number to be $1.47 trillion. Along with that, a firm border policy that the border is stopping the illegals coming across the country. There's over 5 million that we know of. The wokeness in the military, firm cuts in that. And that's the beginning of, we sent a letter back in July. That's what we were asking for. What did we hear? Crickets. And of the 12 appropriation bills, you've got 10 of them. One of them passed, Milcon, and 2 others that have not come out of committee yet, which is one of the bigger ones, Health and HHS. So what we wanted was spelled out on paper back in July. Now, what he has suggested is a clean CR, which is meaning to go to the Pelosi budget and Chuck Schumer budget, which would put us right at, I think her last numbers were $5 trillion or $6 trillion. Either way, it was insane, and we're just not going along with that. So we'll see what happens. We'll come back the next 2 weeks, and the odds of getting, the appropriation bills now passed are slim to none. It's going to have to be some type of CR, but it can't be a clean CR.
Do you support a government shutdown if your demands are not met?
Well, here's what if we can't come to agreement on firm cuts, the country is on life support. I don't support bankruptcy. So yes, if it comes to a government shutdown, let's have it until we can get numbers that make sense to the American people. What we're asking for, Greta, is not out of the question. You got to remember, the government sure shut down the businesses over a stupid COVID shot. They sure shut down education, took children out of the classrooms. So, no, if that's what it takes, we'll do it.
Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, member of the Freedom Caucus, on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program early this morning. A few hours later, he and other House Republicans held their closed-door meeting on Capitol Hill to discuss government spending. And after that, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, came out and spoke to reporters, telling them that starting next week, the House will stay in Washington until this is resolved.
On the appropriations thing, I want to just drill down for a second. You are saying now that you're going to pass all 12 of these bills and go into conference with the Senate?
Look, what I would like to do, look, my goal is to pass all 12. If we can't pass all 12, but to get into conference. Getting into conference is better for the American public, that they can see what has gone through committee. It's stronger to pass on the floor. I've been trying to pass them for quite some time, individually. And get into conference. What happens inside conference, so everybody knows, members on both sides sit there and work out the differences between the two bills. The Senate, they want to spend a lot more money. The House, we're much more conservative. We want to save the taxpayers' money. We want to eliminate the wokeism. We want to protect our border. I know that makes it very hard on this administration when they want to have a wide open border. And in doing so, we can change our differences. I don't think it's productive to have a government shutdown during that time. I don't know who wins, and I don't know how that, watching the shutdowns before, how is that productive to get the objectives that you want to achieve for the American public? So I would like to make that all happen, and we're going to come back in next week, and we're not going to leave until we get this job done.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy with reporters this morning after the closed-door meeting of House Republicans. The House is not in session on Friday and over the weekend for the Jewish holidays. They are back next week. The House has passed one of the 12 annual spending bills so far. Others in the Republican conference also spoke to reporters, including Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, who gave some insight into the private discussions over the threat from another Republican, Matt Gaetz of Florida. He said he would force a House vote on whether to remove Speaker McCarthy from his position because Congressman Gaetz has said the Speaker has not fulfilled his promises to reduce spending and hold votes on other issues, such as congressional term limits.
He told the entire conference, he said, if you want to throw in a motion to vacate, that's fine. I didn't survive 15 rounds for nothing, and I'll survive another 50 rounds.
What do you make of your colleague Matt Gaetz, who is making these threats most explicitly?
Look, Matt is a great friend of mine. He's a wonderful member of Congress, and he and I are big allies, especially in fighting for President Trump and getting President Trump reelected in 2024. I think you're going to see our conference. We may have to come to blows inside our conference and work it out, but I think you'll see good things coming.
Do you think that he would bring a motion to vacate in the next couple of days?
That's a question you'll have to ask for Matt Gaetz. I can't answer that.
Would you support a motion to vacate if someone raised it?
Absolutely not. Not at the time I see any reason to support a motion to vacate. We have to do our job, and from everything I just heard in the room, I have every reason to support Speaker McCarthy. I've never seen a reason not to support him.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, with reporters today. Back to the ABC News article, a spokesman confirmed that Congressman Matt Gaetz was not present at the conference meeting when Speaker McCarthy unloaded because he had, quote, a constituent matter he was attending to. In a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, Congressman Gaetz continued to lay out hardliner demands. We must begin immediately. Pull yourself together, Kevin. That from ABC. Speaker McCarthy, in his press conference, said that he was frustrated with some people in the conference over the status of government funding and appropriations. Congressman Don Bacon, Republican of Nebraska, emerging from the closed meeting of House Republicans, said to reporters the Speaker has a right to be frustrated.
It was a contentious meeting today.
No, it wasn't very contentious. I think the Speaker, though, was blunt about his opinions, but I think we were all in agreement with them.
Thank you. Was there any F-bombs or any?
There may have been one.
Yeah.
But I think the Speaker's rightfully irritated. There's no reason why these appropriations bills have been stood up by a few folks. It's holding up the progress of the House, and it undermines our party and our conference. So he's irritated, and I think that's what I heard.
Is there anything?
That's my translation. I'm not a linguist.
You being McCarthy supporters, moderates, the ones who want to make sure that the House continues to function and fund the government, are you all going to be doing anything to push back against the Freedom Caucus, who of course has been making demands for several months?
There's some thinking going on, but when we're prepared to talk about it, I will. But yes, the answer is yes, because it's unacceptable what's going on, and you're talking a very small number, and the rest of us just can't sit still and get walked over. So with that, they'll let us put gears in motion.
You'll need Democrat votes, though, then, if that's the case.
Yeah,
and Dems are not happy that you guys are moving forward with an impeachment inquiry, so how does that
Yeah, maybe the impeachment inquiry, but you know what? The Democrats I work with don't want to see a shutdown. And there's some basic thing. You know what the Speaker's asking for is a short-term CR with disaster relief.
That's what he asked for in there?
Well, that's what he's always stood for. And by the way, Democrats would support that.
He said he wants the disaster relief to be on the
Well,
DHS bill, not CR.
That was his follow-up plan when he couldn't get other things done. He was trying to find a way to move appropriations bills. But his early position, the way I understand it, was to do a short-term CR with the disaster relief in it, and then maybe some other putting the Ukraine and border stuff together. That was a secondary effort. But the short-term CR is the original plan. The short-term CR with disaster relief, I believe that Democrats would support.
Congressman Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, speaking with reporters outside the closed-door meeting of House Republicans this morning. While all that was going on over in the Senate, they voted to formally bring up a package of 3 fiscal year 2024 spending bills covering veterans, housing, transportation, Food and Drug Administration, and more. Those bills are at the same spending levels negotiated between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden a few months ago as part of the agreement to raise the nation's debt ceiling, the sort of levels that the conservative Republican members have said must be lowered. The vote in the Senate procedurally today 91-7, but then senators disagreed about how to bring up amendments, which amendments will be offered and voted on, so that's all going to be pushed off till next week. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, held his weekly news conference today, answering questions about government spending and a possible shutdown.
Given how little progress has been made this week in the House in connection with spending bills, are you concerned that there's not going to be an ability to reach a short-term spending agreement?
House Republicans have made clear that they are determined to shut down the government and try to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. We believe, as House Democrats, that we should continue to find common ground. And it also appears that Senate Republicans share our views as well. And so you have House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and President Biden and the administration all in lockstep that we reached an agreement as it relates to spending levels that provide for the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people. It was passed into law. It was bipartisan in nature. House Democrats overwhelmingly supported that agreement. It's an agreement that protected Social Security, protected Medicare, protected Medicaid, protected veterans, protected public education. And we believe that we should stick with that agreement. Extreme MAGA Republicans are the only ones in Washington, D.C. who are trying to breach that agreement as part of their effort to undermine the health, the safety, the economic well-being of the American people, because they want to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of everyday Americans by doing things like restricting the ability of women in the military to be able to make their own reproductive health care decisions if they are in restrictive states. That's none of the business of these right-wing politicians, but that's one of the reasons why they're marching us toward a government shutdown, and it's wrong. Heather?
Speaker McCarthy actually said this morning that he does want to put a CR on the floor now, kind of going against these hardliners that you were just talking about. He doesn't want to shut down. Have you talked to the Speaker in the last day or so about a CR and what Democrats would need to support that?
I have not talked to Speaker McCarthy yet about a continuing resolution this week. I have spoken to Leader Schumer, and we're both in agreement that the only way forward is a bipartisan path that funds the government at the current fiscal year levels and deals with some of the requests that President Biden has made with respect to disaster relief funding, funding the effort in Ukraine, and also dealing with the border security dynamics in terms of making sure that the requests made by the Biden administration are addressed.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader at a news conference. NBC News previewing a speech by President Biden today writes, the president expected to highlight the differences between Bidenomics and MAGAnomics in a speech Thursday afternoon, ramping up criticism against Republicans ahead of a potential government shutdown. The president spoke at Prince George's County Community College in Largo, Maryland.
Because the country should know the facts. They should know the choice between Bidenomics and MAGAnomics. American growth and hope, and we're building, or American lost jobs, raising fears. MAGA Republicans gave us a few short years ago. Look, their plan, MAGAnomics, is more extreme than anything America's ever seen before. Just months ago, they went further than anyone has ever gone, threatening to default on the debt that's over 220 years old. Default, unless we gave them everything they wanted. We gave them nothing they wanted. We gave them nothing when we got a deal. But up to now, Republicans have given us a failed plan, a trickle-down economics that didn't work. My guess is your story is just like mine. Not much trickle-down ended up helping y'all. Instead, there's what trickle-down economics did. It shipped jobs overseas. There's a basic thing. Find the cheapest place in the world for labor, send the jobs there, the product there, and then import the product home. Well, you know, they hollowed out the main streets of America. They did the same for the middle class. They blew up the deficit. It produced an anemic economic growth, if any growth at all. And it stripped us dignity and pride and hope out of a community, one after another. You know, when you have those communities where there's been that factory employing 250 people in a small community for years and years, and then it closes down, you don't just lose the jobs, you lose a sense of belonging. People lose hope. They lose their pride. They lose their sense of pride. And now these MAGA Republicans have taken a plan I've never worked, and you know, look, the plan they're proposing never worked, but they decided to make it much, much worse. Now Republicans in Congress are doubling down with a plan that does three things. One, it cuts taxes even more for the very wealthy and big corporations. Two, it cuts Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Three, it raises costs for families, gutting investments in the middle class.
President Biden in Largo, Maryland at Prince George's Community College. CNN reports that today's speech is the latest effort from a White House intent on turning the nation's attention toward Biden's domestic agenda as Republicans in Congress prepare to formally launch an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. The president commented on the impeachment inquiry for the first time on Wednesday night, linking it to the shutdown. He said, "Well, I tell you what, I don't know quite why, but they just knew they wanted to impeach me, and now, the best I can tell, they want to impeach me because they want to shut down the government. Wall Street today, the Dow up 331, NASDAQ up 112, S&P up 37. From the Detroit News, General Motors Company provided another offer to the United Auto Workers in an effort to avoid a strike, the company said Thursday afternoon, less than 12 hours before the potential work stoppage. GM said in a noon statement, "We remain in continuous, direct, and good faith negotiations with the UAW. We can confirm GM has put another economic offer on the table this morning with the goal of avoiding a work disruption at 11:59 p.m. tonight. Any disruption would negatively impact our employees and customers and would have an immediate ripple effect across our communities." Statement comes after the UAW president, Shawn Fain, lambasted offers from GM, Ford, and Stellantis during a Wednesday Facebook Live event with members. Shawn Fain said GM offered an 18% wage increase over the life of the contract in a 4-year period for workers to make top-rate wages. GM's first offer was for a 10% wage increase. And meanwhile, the union has demanded double-digit wage increases of up to 46% over 4 years, cost of living adjustments, and the end of the tiered wage system. That was reporting from Detroit News. In Washington, Congressman Eric Sorensen, Democrat from Illinois, spoke in support of the union.
I rise today in solidarity with the more than 10,000 United Auto Workers in my district as they negotiate a fair contract with the nation's auto industry employers. Let's remember, it was workers who built this country, and their high-quality union jobs gave working people a pathway to the middle class, not just in Illinois, but across this great nation. The current negotiations have implications not just for workers, but for the future of the auto industry and our economic competitiveness. While companies record record profits and the CEOs take home tens of millions of dollars in compensation, the salary of the average auto worker has declined by 40% over the past 20 years. Our UAW neighbors are simply asking for their fair share. To the UAW workers in central and northwestern Illinois and across the country, I've got your back.
Congressman Eric Sorensen, Democrat from Illinois, today on the House floor. Also speaking about the possible UAW strike on the House floor, Congresswoman Lisa McClain, Republican from Michigan, and she linked it to the Biden administration's promotion of electric vehicles.
This coming Friday, the union auto workers is likely going to strike. Nearly 150,000, will stop working, leaving General Motors, Stellantis, and Ford without anyone to build the cars that drive our economy forward. If you ask President Biden, he'll say, it's no big deal, and the strike's not going to happen. Well, let me tell you, Mr. President, guess again. The strike is real, and the dawn is coming tomorrow. While I don't always agree with big labor and their strategies, I can see why they're angry. They've watched as their companies have sold out to the radical Green New Deal agenda and have placed EVs ahead of their employees. Yes, I want to say that. These companies have placed EVs ahead of their employees. For those that don't know, it's simple. EVs take less parts. Less parts means less workers, and less workers hurts our economy. And make no mistake about it, this is happening because of Joe Biden's EV mandates and his reckless agenda to rid the world of reliable engines. It's not a sustainable plan, but Biden seems not to care. And some automakers are just going along to get along with Biden, because even when their profits decrease due to EVs, they have doubled down on their plan at the expense of men and women who build our cars. I want to be clear about something. I'm not against EVs, but I am against mandates.
Congresswoman Lisa McClain, Republican from Michigan, on the House floor today. The House later passed a bill titled Preserving Choice in Vehicle Purchases Act, which would amend the Clean Air Act and would prohibit states from directly or indirectly limiting the sale or use of new gas-powered vehicles. The vote was 222 to 198 Democrats joining Republicans in voting yes. Bill now goes to the Senate. The White House opposes it. California approved a new regulation requiring all cars and trucks sold in 2035 be zero emission. California is the only state allowed to set its own air quality standards higher than the federal government's, and other states are then allowed to follow either the federal government's or California's. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. President Joe Biden's son Hunter has been indicted on federal charges that he bought a firearm without disclosing that he was using illegal drugs at the time. From a Bloomberg News story, the charges follow the collapse of a deal by which Hunter Biden agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax crimes and to acknowledge a firearms violation without a conviction through what is known as a diversion program. But the deal, which involved no jail time, imploded in July when a federal judge questioned its terms and refused to sign off on it. That from Bloomberg. The 3 charges today would carry a total of 25 years in prison maximum. Reaction from Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee.
Ironically, that's the one crime that he committed that you cannot tie Joe Biden into. So we'll see what happens with the other 11 or so crimes that the president's son's committed.
It sounds like you're still expressing the skepticism here. I mean, the idea that you wanted an indictment from your perspective here, that's not enough.
An indictment for money laundering, violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, tax evasion, the list goes on and on. You've never heard me say anything about gun charges. So, again, that's the one crime he's committed that you cannot tie to Joe Biden.
What does this indictment do? Do you think it shows that he's not politicized? Or does
well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. That was an easy charge. You've heard the IRS whistleblowers testify in the Oversight Committee as to all the tax evasion crimes. And according to the whistleblowers, Weiss, when he was the U.S. attorney, let the statute of limitations expire on some of the tax crimes, but not all the tax crimes. So I'm still holding out hope that Weiss does the right thing. This is, the one charge, the least of all the dozen crimes he's committed, the one charge, the one crime that Joe Biden wasn't
suggesting
involved.
There's something nefarious there, that they're trying to keep it in that lane and keep it away from your investigation?
Well, all I'm saying is the facts. This is the one crime the president's son's committed.
Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, the Oversight Committee chair, speaking with reporters on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Also on those steps, MSNBC interviewed the Oversight Committee's ranking Democrat, Jamie Raskin of Maryland.
I don't think people should applaud the system when it works for Hunter Biden, but then try to tear the system down when it works for Donald Trump. I mean, both of them have been indicted on various charges. The presumption of innocence operates for both of them. Due process rights operate for both of them. And, we shouldn't take delight in other people's misfortunes, but we have to have a rule of law.
Congressman Jamie Raskin on MSNBC responding to the announcement today, 3 federal gun charges from the special counsel against Hunter Biden. Those charges come 2 days after House Speaker Kevin McCarthy launched an impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden concerning the president's alleged involvement in Hunter and other family members' foreign business dealings when Joe Biden was vice president. Speaker McCarthy has defended not putting the question of whether to instigate the impeachment inquiry to a full House vote, citing what he says is a precedent set by former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California. She responded today on MSNBC.
Speaker McCarthy made the argument the other day that, well, Nancy Pelosi set this precedent.
She waited a long time to have a vote on the first impeachment of Donald Trump. You did hold a vote, we should add, but he said you made the rules and he's just following them now by not holding this initial vote for an impeachment inquiry. What do you say to that?
I say that that's hogwash. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I don't know why the press keeps repeating it. The fact is, we said we were going to, I assigned my committee chairs, 6 of them, to develop the facts, because you have to act upon the facts. That's a strange thing to say maybe around here, but you have to act upon the facts. We had a couple of weeks of doing that, a few weeks of doing that, and 3 or 4 weeks, we then prepared to bring the bill to the floor. They've had 8 months of investigation, come up with nothing, and now they're trying to say, well, we're not going to have a vote because Nancy didn't have a vote the first day. No, we had a vote. We were in preparation for a vote. But again, this is a big deal, an impeachment. You have to do it with care and not on impulse. And until we had the case ready, that's when we went forward. Now, they, again, have been investigating for months, coming up with nothing, and now they're going to say, on the basis of nothing, we're not going to have a vote on how we go forward. Don't blame it on me. Just take responsibility for what you are doing there, and don't misrepresent the care that we took, the respect that we had for the institution to go forward in a way that really addressed the high crimes and misdemeanors of Donald Trump.
Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker, today on MSNBC. The 3 Republican House committee chairs leading the impeachment inquiry of President Biden briefed other Republican members of the House in this morning's behind-closed-doors meeting of the House Republicans. After Speaker Kevin McCarthy came out and spoke to reporters, was asked about an assessment from another House Republican, Darrell Issa of California, on what the briefing revealed.
Congressman Issa came out and said that both Chairman Jordan and Comer were not able to present anything that was an impeachable offense at this point. Is that an assessment that you share?
You know, impeachment inquiry is not impeachment. So what impeachment inquiry is to do is to get answers to questions. Are you concerned about all the stuff that was just recently learned? Do you have any concern? Have you asked the White House any questions?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree do you believe the president lied to the American public when he said he'd never talked to his son about business dealings? Yes or no? It's all right. You can't answer that? Do you believe when they said the president went on conference calls? Do you believe that happened?
That's what the testimony says.
Okay. Do you believe the president went to Cafe Milano and had dinner with the clients of Hunter Biden, who believes he got those clients because he was selling the brand? Okay. Do you believe Hunter Biden, when you saw the video of him driving a Porsche, that he got $143,000 to buy that Porsche the next day? Do you believe the $3 million from the Russian oligarch that was transferred to the shell companies that the Bidens controlled after the dinner from Cafe Milano took place? Okay, then I go back. Do you think the president lied when he said
an impeachable is lying and impeachable?
Well, you want to know. I'm not saying impeachment. All I'm saying is I would like to know answers to these questions. The American public would like to know, and that's what impeachment inquiry provides.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meeting with reporters this morning. Story from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The Fulton County judge overseeing the sprawling election interference probe involving former President Donald Trump on Thursday split the case's 19 defendants into 2 groups for trial and suggested that more divisions could be merited. Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee ruled that 17 of the defendants would be split off, or severed in legal parlance, from Kenneth Chesbrough and Sidney Powell, who have demanded speedy trials and are set to be tried on October 23rd. The ruling is a blow to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, which argued in favor of keeping all 19 defendants together. In a court filing earlier this week, DA Fani Willis said trying defendants in multiple groups would create a logistical quagmire for courthouse staff, witnesses, and jurors. That reporting from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The Democratic National Committee's Rules and Bylaws Committee met today in Washington to discuss the 2024 presidential primary and caucus calendar. The committee took action to postpone a resolution of an ongoing battle over which state gets to have the first primary. The DNC has chosen this round South Carolina. But New Hampshire, which has been the first for a couple of decades for the Democrats, still wants to be first. New Hampshire had until September 1st to officially give up its spot as the first primary. That deadline has passed. So today, the DNC committee co-chair James Roosevelt made a motion to extend the deadline.
As you'll note, the waiver extended for the New Hampshire Democratic Party expired on September 1, 2023, and we are still only in receipt of a plan that does not include a date in it. We committed at the outset of this process to allow for every opportunity for states to honor the opportunity of hosting their nominating contest within the early window. We want to recommit to that principle and continue to work with the New Hampshire Democratic Party towards that goal. To that end, we would like to put forward a motion to extend New Hampshire's 12A waiver until Saturday, October 14, 2023. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote on the motion to extend New Hampshire's 12A waiver until October 14, 2023. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. I do not hear any nays. So the motion obviously carries.
The DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee co-chair, James Roosevelt, a meeting today of the committee in Washington, D.C. CBS News explains that the extension allows the DNC to reserve its threat of sanctions that would remove some of the state's delegates at the Democratic National Convention next year if New Hampshire does not comply with the national party's primary calendar changes. And if the New Hampshire primary is held ahead of South Carolina, Mr. Biden's campaign may omit his name from the ballot in New Hampshire in protest of its failure to comply with party rules. NASA today released a report from an independent team's year-long study of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, concluding, and this is from an AP story, the study of UFOs, also known as UFOs, will require new scientific techniques, including advanced satellites, as well as a shift in how unidentified flying objects are perceived. And also, officials stressed the panel found no evidence that UAPs had extraterrestrial origin. But NASA Administrator Bill Nelson acknowledged with billions of stars and billions of galaxies out there, another Earth could exist. Here's part of the presentation and news conference. A reporter asked Administrator Nelson about a whistleblower who claims U.S. government is hiding evidence of alien technology.
Thank you. My name is Jacob Jensen. I work for a Danish newspaper called Berlingske. My question is for Mr. Nelson. You said at the beginning of the meeting that that NASA will be transparent. Well, a month and a half ago, Mr. David Grush said under oath in Congress that the U.S. government is in possession of UAPs and extraterrestrial life. How can you be sure at NASA that other parts of the U.S. government is being transparent?
I don't speak for other parts of the government, but I can tell you NASA, which I speak for, is open and transparent with our data.
Do you believe what Mr. David Grush said, or is he lying?
You would want me to give a personal opinion?
Yes, please.
Of what he said. What he said, if I recall having seen this on the nightly news, was that he had a friend that knew where a warehouse was that had an UFO locked up in a warehouse. He also said he had another friend that said that he had parts of an alien. Whatever he said, where's the evidence? Is my response.
Excuse me. He also said that he did interview over 40 employees at the Pentagon.
Long time ago, there was a TV show, Jack Friday, and he used to say, just the facts, just the facts. Show me the evidence.
Thank you, sir.
A question to NASA Administrator Bill Nelson at a news conference today in Cape Canaveral, Florida, a release of this year-long study by a NASA independent team using classified materials about UAPs or UFOs. Administrator Nelson also announced that he is appointing a NASA director of UAP research, but the name of that person is being withheld because of possible harassment by some interested in this issue. Story from CNN, the Russian government is expelling 2 U.S. diplomats for allegedly maintaining contact with a Russian national who worked for the U.S. mission and is accused by Moscow of being an informant. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller responding.
I want to speak to the fact that today the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs informed Ambassador Lynn Tracy of the decision to declare 2 U.S. diplomats persona non grata. This unprovoked expulsion of our diplomatic personnel is wholly without merit, as is the case against a former Russian contractor of our embassy who was arrested for the supposedly nefarious task of performing such activities as providing our embassy with media clips. Yet again, Russia has chosen confrontation and escalation over constructive diplomatic engagement. It continues to harass employees of our embassy, just as it continues to intimidate its own citizens. We regret that Russia has taken this path, and you can certainly expect that we will respond appropriately to their actions. And with that, Matt.
Okay. When can we expect to see a response?
I don't want to preview
Today?
that. I don't want to preview that, but we have acted expeditiously in the past in response to such actions by the Russian Federation.
Okay, and then just going, well, I presume that you don't have anything more to say about this. I mean,
no.
These 2 were, as far as the U.S. is concerned, were just doing their jobs and not doing anything nefarious.
They were just doing their jobs, as was the underlying employee who the Russian government arrested some months ago, was doing, completely legal tasks that are in compliance with Russian law.
Have they looked yet?
No, they have not. Anything else on that? Let's say this. Go ahead.
Have you already summoned Russian ambassador?
I don't want to speak to exactly the steps that we are taking to respond, but you can certainly expect that we will do so. I'm not going to say when we're going to take those steps. We will make those clear to the Russian government, and we will make them clear to you at the appropriate time.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference today in Washington. And some other news out of Russia, the Kremlin saying that President Vladimir Putin has gratefully accepted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's invitation to visit Pyongyang after their recent meeting in Russia, a meeting that President Putin described as timely, useful, and constructive. The U.S. government has said it's concerned the 2 leaders are working towards a deal for Russia to buy ammunition from North Korea to use in Russia's war against Ukraine. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories being talked about in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.